Let's keep calm and mother on. Mothering is way too important to do alone and way too serious to be serious all the time. My name is Christy Thomas, and I am here shoulder to shoulder with you, mothering and enjoying life together. This is the podcast where you can focus on being mindful and taking a deep breath with me and learning new things so you can pause and savor the amazing life you already have. This episode will meet you where you are with picky eaters, but there are some audio glitches, so when you're listening, it's not your earbuds, and I apologize in advance. I am so excited today to welcome Sarah Appleman. She wrote the book, Play With Your Food, and Sarah is an occupational therapist. Is that right, Sarah?
Yes.
Okay. I love your book. It is fun and clever, and we're doing this theme for March, this March Madness theme of things that drive moms crazy. And definitely picky eating and food issues, especially at the end of the day, drive moms crazy.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely the hot topic that I've always been asked when I'm working with kids.
So Sarah, let's learn a little bit about you. You're a mom, right?
Yes. 2 kids. My son will be 17 and my daughter just turned 14.
And your kids inspired you a little bit for this book, right?
Yeah. My son from the beginning was a handful. So I had, in labor for like almost 2 days. It was forever. And then he ended up with like decelerating a lot and had to be an emergency C-section. And then, everything you study, everything you work for, everything that's typical, all the beautiful Hollywood movies, it's out the door. And it's like, okay, his safety is now concerned. I'm like, just do it, do the C-section, and
yeah,
let's go. And so, and then he had physical weakness and he had visual. He was, had to be patched and he has thick glasses. And so he had depth perception. He just had everything. And one of the things was huge, like tactile concern where he gagged and he did not want to touch or eat food. And we had to, they always say like, put your work hat back on when you go home, and how to combine being my therapist with a mom, and it worked and he did great. And I just put that back and shared it with my clients over the past 22 years of working. And then I just, people were just approaching me and asking like, oh, you should write a book. You should write a book. And, working and balancing home and kids. And
there's a lot on your plate.
Every person out there today, whether you're a stay-at-home mom, a working mom, a part-time, full-time, everybody has to multitask. And it's difficult. But when you're, really enthusiastic and excited about something, it definitely helps.
Absolutely. I am so glad you wrote this book because I think there's a lot of myths out there about how to help a picky eater. Like when I was reading your book, the first thing that comes to mind always is, I was a picky eater when I was a kid, or my brother was a picky eater. Is picky eating genetic?
That's a really good question, actually. They haven't been able to scientifically prove whether it is or isn't genetic. But the rationale as to why I found some of the children to be picky eaters, parents, just like you said, would be like, oh, well, I didn't example I usually give is like after soccer practice, touching the oranges.
Yeah.
And parents are like, oh my God, I didn't want to touch the oranges when I didn't want to get sticky. And then I'm like, but that's your kid, so there is some genetic, predisposition, I think. And it's also how you handle it. So like I've had parents that don't mind getting sick or don't mind getting dirty, but then I have parents who are like, almost to the point of OCD where they have to wipe everything and I'm like, but that behavior is being taught to that child that messy is bad.
Yeah, it's being picked up in the environment, even if you're not saying it.
Yes, exactly. And so, and then the parents getting frustrated with the child being dirty. So then I'm like, you have to have that healthy balance of working, playing, having fun, getting messy, and then being clean. So that is definite. I do see a correlation with either it's a parent or a sibling and then the picky eating child. So I'm curious in the future if they could have like a genetic,
Yeah. Or I wonder if it really just all comes down to like, if it's really just a sensory thing and we're just becoming so aware of all of that knowledge right now. It's still so new. I think it feels new still that sensory needs are like a real thing and sensory aversions. Where would you start if you have a kid that like you serve a meal, right? So should we be serving separate meals, the same meals? Let's start with some basics.
That's like the worst. They're like, I don't have time to make a meal, and I'm coming home and I'm making a meal. Now you want me to make another separate meal? That's like, people will burn my book. That it's not like I
exactly
can't be saying that. So and look, in an idealistic situation, when you have time, and this is what I tell parents all the time, I'm like, try to have something that you know that they're going to eat on that same thing before introducing something they're not going to eat. So if your child loves carrots or apples or whatever it is, try to positively associate that into your side dish or into, do you know what I mean? So it's like, it's nothing so terrifying and scary. The most important thing is, and this is what I tell parents, is getting them in when they're young.
Okay.
So from when a child is really young, it could be 1.5. It doesn't even matter. Pouring, mixing, stirring, watching you in the kitchen, smiling and getting messy, and letting them understand that is going to help them because it opens up their scent of smell, their texture sense, taste. It's all connected. Hearing even the noises. So getting them in the kitchen as early, and we have seen such a positive increase in their attitudes, behaviors, and food intake just by having them have some control of being in the kitchen, helping to pick out a recipe, serving it, and watching others eat, because that's the other big thing is positive role modeling. If you don't have people eating it, the same thing, they're like, no, you have to eat that, but I'm not going to eat it. Like, no, they're not going to eat it,
Right.
So dinner time is really your time to smile and engage and have fun with it and get them to see you eating it. And after some of that time, and I just had this conversation with other parents because I was like, someone was like, oh yeah, when I was younger, I didn't like eating mushrooms.
That was me. That's totally me. That is my story.
It's so I literally was just having this conversation with moms the other day, and I was like, okay, so what happened? What changed? And she like couldn't pinpoint the moment that mushrooms were then okay. And I said, well, let me give you an example. You're watching TV commercial, you're watching people eat, and subconsciously, visually, you're seeing people eat mushrooms, all the restaurants, in magazines.
Exactly.
So your brain has become so desensitized that it's not a threat, and you don't have to fight or, do that fight or flight. It's just, oh, okay. And then maybe you try a recipe and you're like, oh my God, that's really not bad. I like it. And then it becomes okay. And that's that same approach for kids. We want them to see it, smell it, be desensitized, draw it, talk about it, play games with it, that it's just like no big deal the more that they see it. So it's a lot of desensitization.
That sounds simple, but hard at the same time.
It's really, I promise you, it's really not. Like I've had, like I said, I have my son who didn't want to get dirty. And the first thing I'm like, oh, you want cookies? Well, you have to help mommy mix them. And I didn't let him get too dirty. Right. He had to first pour. And when the flour got on his hand, and I knew that was something he hated, that texture, I had a wet, towel ready, warm, and I gave a nice deep massage, pulling at each finger like you get at a manicure. It's very soothing. So he's like, oh, okay, I'm not going to be stuck doing this for 5 hours and the panic mode goes on. It's, oh, I don't like that. Wipe my hands and then try it again. So he felt safe because a lot of times these kids don't know duration, which is why I say sing to them. Because they know when they're done, it's that process is over, and have that tune. So like I'll teach kids how to tolerate movement or food or anything. And I'll be like, I literally can make up any words. It'll be like, this is the way we mix the dough, mix the dough, mix the dough. And then like, next, and now we're all done. Yeah, you did it. And like, they're so distracted by the singing. And then they have that internal clock of this way.
Right. Their brain knows the song enough to know that it's going to end.
And I've had kids that like, oh my God, my kid has never done XYZ for that long. I'm like, you've got to just sing to them. And it does help.
So if a mom wants to help with this and like introduce things and have their kids play in the kitchen, what's like the easiest thing that if you're like a mom that's panicking, like I just want to sit through a dinner and now we have to make the dinner together, I guess, in order to sit through it. So what's something simple they can start with? Okay.
So first thing is first. Like I said before, what is your kid's favorite meal? So start it really simple, okay? So let's take your kiddo. Like what's a meal?
They don't love red sauce, but they love meatball and pasta. Right?
Okay, so they'll eat just the meatball, but not the sauce.
Right. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So right here and there, I will come up with activities, okay? So number one, having them make the sauce. So I make a very simple sauce, right? Where it's like saute an onion, put tomato sauce, tomato paste, and then you could just you don't have to use fresh. Obviously, fresh is ideal, like fresh parsley.
Always,
but let's just say the tolerance is like, let's be real, like not everyone has a garden.
That's one of the tricks I've learned as a mom, right? If I can have everyone be able to adjust their own spices at the table, then usually we can serve the same sort of food.
Exactly. And then, so I have them, and I have like this handheld blender thing that's super cute.
Oh,
you
nice.
Just like put it in, and then the kids are like, oh my God, this is super cool. And they watch all of it get mushed together, and it changes color a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then you say, okay, taste it. What do you think we need? Now, they don't realize it, but they're dipping their tiny pinky, tasting. You got it in their mouth. It doesn't matter. Then what I would do is, like, again, play with your food, right?
Yeah.
So I would have, with the spaghetti, you could say, oh, you know what? If you dip it in the red sauce, it'll help. And watch, we're going to have a game. Who could pull the spaghetti up in their face faster? But it's harder when it's dry. So I'm going to dip just a little bit to make it, again, it's a game. It's not focusing that they're eating the sauce. It's going to assist them in, okay, great. That's 2. 3, you can make a face with the eyeballs. Oh my goodness, we're going to make hair. And, oh, let's change the hair. I want mine to have red hair. Can you put sauce on mommy's red hair? You see what I'm saying? So it's like, you're going to eat it, but just those are 3 things right away. I grew up at our table was a very happy place because you get to have delicious foods and you get to have choices and you get to have, talk about the day. Things come out when you're sitting at the table that you may miss about your child. Like they're relaxed, they're eating, they're happy. And then suddenly something spills out of their mouth that you were like, oh my God, Yeah,
it's a magical moment to have connection over. Community is built at a table.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's why I always say, like, put your cell phones away, because at our table, we look at each other in the eye, we have a conversation, we, and it could be anything, movies or news or.
Right. It changes as the kids grow, right?
Absolutely. And so that's if you're going to be anxious because your kid's going to fight and cry, and then you as a parent are having that frustrating point of providing them with a nutritious meal that they can't eat, then you feel less as a mom or dad, and it's very hard to accept that because you want to be able to provide for your kid.
Yeah. So it induces a lot of shame that you can't get your kid to eat.
But know that you're not alone. There are millions of people that are doing the exact same, hair pulling, fighting at dinner time, or going out to the restaurant and packing every toy and everything. And kids are still melting down. And, everybody is dealing with, whether it's your son, daughter, niece, nephew, best friends, kids who are picky eaters.
Right. It feels hard to you, but it's not unique.
Right. Exactly. There's a whole community of parents out there.
So when you have a guest over to your house, because I'm sure you've had guests come over to your house that are picky eaters and the meal's ready. So what do you do if you go to someone's house with your kid that's a picky eater and you're not in control of what's being served?
That's a really good point. And so usually the first thing that I always ask when usually someone's coming to my house is, what does your kid like? And I think that is something that you should, as the host, ask, because it's important, because you have allergies that you have to worry about. So I've had kids that came over my house who have peanut allergies, or, can't eat, they're gluten-free. So I, as a host, it's my job, I feel, to find out, because you don't want to serve someone who has a peanut allergy, someone with peanuts.
Absolutely.
Or dairy allergy, something with dairy in it. So these are things that you should first try your best to say, hey, I just want to let you know, this is something this child likes. So I had one of the last pictures that we took after, it was about a 7-hour photo shoot. And I had 50 people in and out of the house. I was exhausted.
I bet.
And this boy, which I didn't know because the parents hadn't told me, because he usually eats at my house, but I didn't know that he was a picky eater. And he was just mixing the last thing we did was sloppy Joe. And so he was standing over a pan with his dad. I stayed out of it. I just told them what to add from behind the scene. And they were adding it, and the smell was coming. He's like, oh my gosh, it smells good. And he said, I'm not going to eat it though. I said, don't, absolutely don't. But can you just hold it up to your mouth like you're going to eat it? And a piece dripped in his mouth. And he went, ooh, that's really good. And he ended up eating the whole sandwich. His mom starts crying. The camera guy was crying. I was tearing up. I'm like, this is why we do what we do, because he smelt it, and he was making it. And then 2 weeks later, I get a text like, hi, it's me. Can you please give my mom the recipe, because I love it so much. It's my new favorite. And she couldn't believe it. And now since that point, he's been eating more. So changing spices or changing, different things. I would, if a parent, there's just no way they're going to eat nothing, and people don't try to create.
Yeah, you're in a lousy local condition and there's nothing good on the table. So,
I mean, in that situation, you could either pack something with you that's prepared, in a container, and you could have it for them. I just don't love doing that, because I don't want them to become reliant that you're the food source. Do you know what I mean? You kind of want them to be a little bit independent, but if you want to enjoy, it's a family friend or a gathering, and you're just not, you need time too, you need your own mental health moment, then I don't think either feeding prior to arrival is one of the big ones, or carrying something that that they can eat. You say, listen, we're working on it. It's a process. And people, like I said, because they're so aware of the situation, I don't think they're going to be as critical, as 20, 30 years ago, like rolling their eyes if you bring, something.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, even now I have a food allergy, and I always have a snack in my bag, because I know if I go to an event, I can't necessarily trust the organizer to have remembered. So yeah, it's just easier.
And that's it's same thing. Sometimes it's just easier, and that's okay. But like when I tell parents when they want to go to a restaurant, so because I do look at things from a sensory perspective.
Yes.
So I tell parents, prep your child, because if you're going to take that sensory overloaded child into a noisy restaurant with so many sounds, taste, smells, touch, and then you're going to be like, okay, what do you want? So the first thing is I tell them, make sure to do, it could be jumping jacks, wheelbarrow walks, take them to the playground, get their energy out and get them hungry. Second is you're going to want to pre-look at that menu, because that'll give them like, oh, look at all these great pictures. Oh, I heard this is really good. Start putting it out there that these are the choices.
Yeah.
And when the kid is hungry and set, they're going to be able to be more willing to try something. So
I love how you pregame that.
Yeah. And the same thing when you go to your friend's house, same concept. You want to do some heavy work, sensory-based vestibular, spinning, jumping, running, and then like a calming afterwards. So doing a puzzle, coloring book, to calm them after you get the energy out. And you will see, you do it at least an hour and change prior to your, to going.
Those tips alone are gold right there. Even for like a kid that's not necessarily a picky eater, just restaurants and different environments are super stimulating and hard to get used to, especially a lot of these kids have been home for the last 2 years, right?
Months.
Like this is not just a sensory overload for sensory sensitive kids nowadays. This is a sensory overload for like me. I went to a restaurant and I was like, whoa, this is noisier than I remembered.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the other thing I say to people. I'm like, people become so acclimated to being home in their safe environment. And then when they do leave it, it's a big overstimulation. I mean, my kids are still getting used to school. They get overwhelmed with, people and noise and this and that. And like, they sometimes just need a downtime, because it's a lot to get readjusted back into everyday living.
It absolutely is. So if you have a kid, so say mom's listened and she's like, okay, we really do have some sort of sensory situation going on with food. And Sarah's book sounds great, but I should maybe look for a local expert. What would a mom look for if she wanted to reach out into her community? Because she's like, oh, I didn't know this was even an option.
Yeah, no, the number one thing is you tell your pediatrician. Pediatrician has to be made aware of the situation so they can monitor obviously nutrition, health, growth, and well-being. So you want to let your pediatrician know. The next step is to get an occupational therapist who specializes in picky eating. Now, depending on where you live, sometimes a speech pathologist might be the one in charge of eating, and sometimes it's the occupational therapist. So, because for when I was on the East Coast, a lot of it was both speech or OT. Here, there's more OT on the West Coast.
Okay. I've definitely had speech kids, and I know that those speech therapists have worked with eating issues.
And that's what's so interesting, because I was on both coasts, different coasts, and it's so different. But absolutely, you want to get assessed, because here's the thing, there are things, especially with your first child, that you may not even be aware. Like, you're doing everything right. Like, they have all these jokes and all this stuff, like first kid versus second kid. But it's true, because that first kid, you are crazy, neurotic, nervous. You're having birthdays because you're so excited that you made it another year.
Exactly. It is the mom celebration for the first kid. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we made it here.
Exactly. So that is what is so important for people to understand, that they may not even be aware, like, oh my God, I didn't even notice that. But how could you, or unless you had a second kid to compare it to the first kid,
right.
And like, oh, I don't remember, wow, he's doing that different or that, so, first thing is, if you're noticing picky eating, and again, like, there's also a difference, which I tell people, when your child starts becoming that terrible twos, which I found is more terrible threes. In my clinical and professional opinion, it's like a little bit later. It's not so much terrible two anymore. It's that terrible three. They are independent and they're making choices.
Exactly.
And it's not because they really are picky eaters. It's because they're showing their power.
They're trying to show autonomy, that they have the power to say no.
And we also forget, like, we eat, big portions, when you go out, there's like this huge portion. We're not even supposed to eat that much. And we have to remember, your child's belly is so little and they don't need that much to fill up, so if they are supposed to have milk, or or they're nursing, or they're whatever it is, and they're getting their nutrients through, whether it's pureed food or whatever, you're making sure that but they don't have to eat, as much as you
think. The quantity isn't as much.
Yeah. So just keep those in mind. And I think that, that's part of that issue too. Like, oh, he didn't eat so, but he ate enough for him. So there's that difference between that, independent struggle, the want to run and play versus picky eating. Picky eating, it's like, my kid eats chicken nuggets from McDonald's, French fries, and, maybe one other thing, and that's it.
Right. Very specific brands, very limited. You can taste the difference.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's when you have a concern. And when that concern arises, pediatrician, speech, OT. And then, like I said, there are some times where I look at a kid, I'm like, they have weakness, fine motor delays. So that affects their chewing and their ability to digest food. So they're going to want those softer foods that they don't have to chew as much. So it may not only be texture, it may be because it's easier for them.
That their body just needs more help growing into those. So interesting. We're so much more complicated than we just want to sit down and eat a dinner. And then sometimes I remember at different phases of my kids, right, that they like nibble at one meal and I get nervous, but the next meal they're like, I'm hungry, and they like eat more than I could ever eat myself. So it's that awareness too, that we can put these labels in our heads, and maybe we just need to play with some food some more and relax.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And I tell parents also, like, make sure it's over a weekend or something that's not stressful, because during the week, if you're going here, there, after school, they have dance or they have soccer or it's very stressful. The last thing you're going to want to do after your long day and that kid's long day is make a mess in the kitchen. Okay, set aside Sunday morning breakfast time or Sunday morning brunch, or, something you start to look forward to where your kids could research Saturday, like, hey, what are we going to make tomorrow? And what are you guys into? And, we had blueberry pancakes. Do you want strawberry or banana or chocolate? Have fun and be creative with it, so that it's something you all look forward to and spend that quality of time. You could put music on. You have, the pretty setup, and it just visually makes them excited, to cook with you and prepare food, and then you eat together, and it starts to become more often and exciting. And then suddenly your kids are gonna be like, I want to try to make this, and you're like, go right ahead. That's awesome.
Absolutely. So, and I know, like, when I've gone to like my mom's house and she gets them involved by like folding the napkins and just tiny tasks that are adjacent to the food making.
Absolutely.
Too, like, let's make place cards for everybody.
Yeah, I say that all the time. I say, let them set the table, because also, like, carrying the plates or carrying stuff, it's heavy, right?
Yeah.
So again, that's prep work. So they could help carry a couple plates, put it out. I tell parents, use the tweezers and put ice into the glass, because you're working on a fine motor. I'm like, pouring, great. That's another heavy jug of milk, water, doesn't matter. And you're pouring. That's, again, calming, because it's lifting. So there's so many things you could do to prep for the actual meal that's not directly related to food.
That is fantastic. You've given me so many ideas for how to be a better hostess for when kids come over to my house, but also just to think about how to slow down and really just enjoy a family meal.
Right.
I'm excited to sit down with a couple of my kids that push my patience level with some sensory things that that we can sit and like look on Pinterest and pick out some meals together, or pause a TV show. Have you ever seen the TV show Just Add Magic at all on Amazon?
No.
Okay, so I want to throw this in here because we watched it like a couple of years ago. I don't know, 2016. So it's like years and years ago, but it's on Amazon Prime and it's great. It's 3 girls who find a magic cookbook. And so there's all sorts of slow cooking montages of these 3 tween girls cooking and trying new things and fancy spices, because they're all magic, right? Everything makes something different. So if you have a kid, right, like watching those cooking shows together might be another way to help out.
Oh, my family loves Nailed It, because it's so funny, watching people. And that's the thing. And then we're like, okay, we could try to do that, and whether we do it good or not. And it's funny, and it makes you have, again, that positive association of like laughing, bonding.
Yeah, just trying
it's
it.
not about that. Yeah, that outcome. People put too much pressure because of, I think, like the Pinterest and all the social media. Like, look what I created. I made a rabbit out of a carrot and a tomato. And I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. But like the reality is like mine looks like a hedgehog that got run over. I don't know,
Yeah, and
So
my
there are
school
certain
lunch boxes
things.
are never going to look that fancy.
Yeah, like, no. So it's okay. Again, like that's that anxiety from a parent that they're not living up to these standards of, very talented and amazing, but let's be realistic. Like that's why on the Instagram I have Play With Your Food
Yes.
book. I do easy things where it was like peeling, we peeled a pear, and I just was like, oh my God, I play games and to put like a toothpick with grapes. So it's super easy. You really can't go wrong because you're just sticking them in.
Yep.
And the kids loved it. They absolutely loved it. They had so much fun with it. And it was working on their eye-hand coordination, fine motor skills. And then they ate it. So they got grapes and a pear.
Yeah.
So, it's trying to find things that you can actually do realistically.
Yeah.
And like simple things that multi-sensory approach.
And if you eat it and they don't, that's okay to start with, right?
I tell them to do a smell or lick it. That's the beginning. I never tell a kid, you have to eat it. I'm like, just smell it. What does it smell like? Oh, is it sweet? How do you think it tastes? Like, lick it. Do you think it tastes? So I'm going to lick mine. Ooh, that's sour. That's a lemon. Ooh, that is sour. I like that though, or I don't like that, and then they could start using words to describe it. And let what, actually, I like that. Oh, okay, great. Let's try something else, and so it's just a way to get them to play and have fun with it while it's educational. Like I said, multisensory, fine motor, overall skill building.
Yeah.
And bonding with your kid.
And that sounds way less stressful than sitting down at the table.
Yeah. And
worrying about it all.
Yeah. Not to do that.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you for coming in and helping figure out how to be less mad when meals come out, because it's a whole thing. And everyone online, you're right, the social media, the highlight reels of like how the food looks and the tablescapes. You don't ever see the tablescape of the kid who left the table because they wouldn't try, or the mom who was like, fine, you can have macaroni and cheese for the 5th night in a row. Absolutely. And that's what if it wasn't such a hot topic, there wouldn't be so many people writing and trying to get to the, and that's what I say. I'm like, this is the main approach I've seen, that I came to the conclusion where I said, you know what, I think now, there are kids who have physical issues, like hypergag reflexes, issues with their tongue, mouth, cleft palate, medical issues. Right.
That is a completely separate. I'm not addressing those items. I'm talking about those picky eaters who really have those sensory concerns, and they're impacting their ability to participate in mealtime because the scent, the smell, the touch, the taste, it's too much for them. And we have to address those concerns to help them through it. Yeah. And that's what I did. The book it's a recipe book.
Yes.
That
it's fun.
Simple
we have made things from the book as a family.
It's so simple, easy, fun. And then at the same time, it gives you therapeutic intervention, therapeutic tips. Like, your child may not like this, try this, and activities to go with it. So it's helpful because it gives parents a plan and a way to deal with it.
Absolutely.
And I found that was really crucial.
And it's important to not be stressed about it.
Absolutely.
And when you are super stressed, like we said, talk to your pediatrician, get the referrals, reach out for help, because there are experts out there. You don't have to be ashamed about asking for that help.
Yeah, and the earlier the better. So if you see, the earlier you realize it, get them help, because it's harder to address as that child gets older. So I switch back. I do early intervention now, birth to 3 years old.
Yeah.
Because I was like, these are the crucial years to get these kids, feeling confident. You see their confidence skyrocket. Mm-hmm. And that's what I love. I love seeing a kid who's timid and avoidant and nervous, and it impacts them socially. Mm-hmm. And now they are, keeping up with their peers, if not surpassing them. And mom's sending me pictures of their first days of school. And it makes me so happy, like that's what I want. I want them to be successful and independent.
Fantastic. Well, Sarah, every episode I have ends with 2 questions. So I want to give you time to think about them in case I forgot to give you a heads up. The first one is what's a good self-care idea, right? So we know meals can be super stressful. So do you have a simple self-care idea for a mom, or something you do to help take care of yourself?
So I personally have to do exercise in the morning because it sets my mood. So whether I'm walking the dog, going for a run, treadmill or walk outside, because I need that time for me to set my day. So, there are parents who do it after work. Mm-hmm. I'm always impressed by them because I'm so tired at the end of the day, less motivated. Find if I do it in the morning, that I'm more likely to be successful, and then it sets my mood for the day.
I love that.
That's definitely.
Yeah, I think exercise early in the day totally changes. My kids will tell me that I'm grumpy and ask if I've exercised or not.
See? And so that I definitely do, because it really does. It just puts you in that right mood.
So how about a family fun idea? Maybe it's a simple recipe that you could tell us to try, or how are you having fun as a family?
I actually love when my kids look online and or if we watch something, we watched Crazy Rich Asians.
Oh, yeah.
And then my daughter wanted me to make dumplings.
Ooh.
And so then we researched different, bought the bamboo, and we just had so much fun. And then we reached it and ate while the scene came on, rolled it out. And,
that's fantastic.
So doing things like that, if you're inspired by, a kid's show or a movie or something that inspires you guys, and make it together, and it really is fun, because then you get to feel like you're really involved in it. Themes a lot here. So we do it for Harry Potter. We make a whole Harry Potter based dinner. And then I'll do, what's the other? We love Schitt's Creek. So we make Schitt's Creek themed foods. So as a parent, there might be a film, movie, or something that you could inspire them, ooh, we should try that. And I also love science. Science is so, for me, my kids are love learning and love. So, cooking with science, ooh, they have a lot of interesting things if you do this with the egg when you cook it versus, things like that. So depending, because I'll work, like I said, mostly with ages 0 to 3, and then I'll treat 3 to 5. But the older kids, I try to come up with real, okay, let's write out the recipe and then let's compare it and let's see what we could have done. So there's a whole different way to address it with older kids versus younger kids. But yeah, I'm very big on themed dinners and having fun with it, and it's my kids love it. They get it. Very excited.
Yeah, well, I think that sounds really fun, because motherhood is way too serious to be serious all the time. And and we really need to just enjoy it more and take the stress off. So, Sarah, where can everyone find you besides finding your book, Play with Your Food, on Amazon? Yeah. So is that your Instagram handle too, Sarah?
Play With Your Food book is on the Instagram, and playwithyourbook.com is the website. And I have blogs, resources, newspaper articles I was, in. So there's a lot of things that I write about based on questions parents ask me. Fantastic. And so we turned it into blogs and videos. So the Instagram, there's Pinterest, all of those things. But the website's a great resource.
Great. There's some mom that is crying over dinner times, and she just needs to find you and your fun ideas. So thank you for being here. I'm glad that you're being brave and showing up and doing the work, because I know that writing a book and working on all these things takes a lot of time. So thank you.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun. Thanks so much.
Never, ever forget that you are exactly the right mom for your kids. And even if they're driving you mad with food, you can find help and have fun. I am so thankful you're here. Please text this to 2 friends that have picky eaters. We need to help each other. And I hope you have a really amazing week. Bye, everyone.